What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here, and in this video, I'm going to be going over the new and improved Dawn Chorus build for this season. Grandmasters are right around the corner, so I wanted to show off what I think is the best version of this build. It has definitely changed since last season, and that is thanks to the artifact, which makes this build far better now. I've also been seeing this build being used out in the wild a lot more since my last video on it a few months ago, and that feels great because it absolutely wrecks. I will also be giving 2 alternate ways to play this build, so without further ado, let's get into it. The build obviously centers around the Warlock exotic Dawn Chorus, which has the exotic perk Rites of Ember. Your Daybreak projectiles deal more damage and scorch targets on impact. Your Scorch is improved, and you gain a small amount of melee energy when your Scorch damages a target. So the Scorch damage is increased by 200% or 3 times more damage. I did a complete breakdown of everything you need to know about Scorch, so if you want more info on that, be sure to check out that video as I go very in depth. But for this video, I will just be referring to things I found out when I was doing that testing. The aspects we want to run are Touch of Flame, which enhances whatever grenade we want to run, and then Icarus Dash for the movement. So because our Scorch damage is increased, we really want to build into scorching targets, so that is where the Fragments come in. First and foremost, we have Ember of Ashes, which applies more Scorch to targets. This is typically 50% more for whatever the application is, and that results in more damage and quicker and easier ignitions, so we definitely want that. Next, we have Ember of Eruption, which gives our solar ignitions greater AoE. This build procs ignitions constantly, so we might as well make them as strong as we can. Next is Ember of Char, where our ignitions will spread Scorch to affected targets. This also gives us plus 10 discipline, which is nice. So any enemies that don't die to the ignition will get scorched and take additional damage thanks to Dawn Chorus and Ember of Ashes. And then the last fragment I run is Ember of Wonder, where rapidly defeating targets with our ignitions will spawn an Orb of Power. Again, we do this a lot, so it will make lots of orbs. It also gives plus 10 to Resilience. And once again, I cannot recommend Polaris Lance and a machine gun with Incandescent enough for this build. Polaris Lance can make ignitions with ease thanks to the artifact mods. Again, I have a video breaking down how exactly it does this so easily this season, so if you want more in-depth info, check that one out. But I will get into some of that info here with the artifact mods. The new artifact mods are super important to this build. In the last version of the build, we needed Ember of Torches to give us Radiant, but this season we can use Flint Striker for that instead, where rapid solar precision hits or weapon funnel blows will grant us Radiant. This is based on magazine size. So Polaris Lance only needs to land 4 crits to give you Radiant, and the 5th crit will be the perfect 5th shot which applies Scorch. But here's what's crazy. If we run Kindling Trigger, when we have Radiant, it will apply 45 Scorch stacks to an enemy that isn't already scorched. It is normally 30 Scorch, but Ember of Ashes takes us to 45. And then Polaris Lance with Ember of Ashes applies 60 Scorch. So if we shoot a non-Scorch enemy with a perfect 5th shot, it will apply 105 Scorch and cause an ignition. And what we learned in my Scorch video is that all Scorch stacks are removed when we cause an ignition. So we just keep shooting to reapply Kindling Trigger, and then when we proc the perfect 5th again, we will cause another ignition. This is great as ignitions can stun unstoppable champions, and when we are Radiant, we can stun barrier shields. And we never have to reload Polaris Lance because as long as we land crits, it keeps pulling from the magazine. And landing 4 crits in a row will keep proccing Flint Striker for 10 seconds. So that is the gameplay loop. Land your crits with Polaris Lance to trigger super easy ignitions. And thanks to all our fragments, our ignitions will be dealing greater AoE damage and spreading Scorch to other targets which will take increased damage thanks to Dawn Chorus. And we'll make an orb every time our ignitions kill an enemy. Now, a lot of the time we are sitting back blinking away with Polaris Lance, so I like to run a weapon with Shoot to Loot in the kinetic slot so that I can pick up the orbs that the ignitions made from afar. Why is this important? Well, because I have triple Solar Surge on my boots, so then we deal an additional 22% more weapon damage on our solar weapons. So this will buff our Polaris Lance and a solar machine gun if you are running one, or a solar rocket launcher which is also really good to run with this build, especially if the content has overload champions in it. And keep in mind, the Solar Surge stacks with Radiant, which we constantly have up, and Radiant and Solar Surges will also stack with our Scorch damage, so long as it was a weapon that applied the Scorch. If you apply Scorch with a melee or grenade, then you will not get the bonus from Radiant or Surges, but you will still get the bonus from Dawn Chorus. And that brings us to the 2 different playstyles. I love running this build with Fusion Grenades and Celestial Fire melee. A fusion grenade can apply 60 scorch stacks, so if you shoot an enemy with Flint Striker and then throw a grenade on it, you can cause an easy ignition. And Celestial Fire can apply 45 scorch stacks and works well at a distance. So the playstyle I run is to just cause as many ignitions as I can, and I have soloed Master Nightfalls with this playstyle and it has worked extremely well. But there is an alternate playstyle. Instead of Ember of Wonder where you get an orb from your ignition procs, you can run Ember of Empyrean instead. This will extend restoration and radiant effects applied to you, and we're running Touch of Flame, so this will give our healing grenades ×2 restoration. Restoration did get hit with a nerf this season, but it is still extremely strong. And this build is extremely easy to get solar weapon kills with, so this fragment with a healing grenade could make you damn near invincible, and you are only missing out on making orbs on ignition kills. I like Ember of Wonder, but again, if you aren't running a shoot to loot weapon, it is often hard to pick up the orb. So depending on the content, then this fragment and grenade swap could be extremely effective. Again, I also like the enhanced fusion grenades from Touch of Flame, but the choice is yours. For survivability, run healing grenades and Ember of Empyrean, but for even more destruction, go with Ember of Wonder and fusion grenades. So now that we know the two different playstyles, let's look at the armor mods. On the helmet, I have 2 solar siphons by way of harmonic siphon and a heavy ammo finder. Exotic primaries give a higher chance at getting an ammo finder brick, so this is great. On the arms, I have fastball for when I run fusion grenades, and then impact induction and focusing strike for grenade and class ability energy when I deal damage with a melee. Remember, Dawn Chorus gives melee energy when you scorch targets, and we do a lot of that. Therefore, we get a lot of melees. And if you aren't running fastball, then you could go with a solar weapon loader here instead. The robes, just run whatever resistance the activity calls for. The legs, we have triple solar surges like I mentioned, though it might be worth running 2 surges and 1 solar scavenger instead, especially if you're running a rocket launcher. And then on the bond, we have 2 bomber mods for grenade energy when we cast our rift, and a time dilation mod to extend the duration of our surge buff. Then on the artifact, I already mentioned the excellent power of Flint Striker and Kindling Trigger, but we also have Torch where we deal 5% increased weapon damage to combatants affected by Stasis or Strand, and Heart of the Flame, which will further increase our already incredibly strong Daybreak super. The damage increase depends on how many allies you have near you during your super, and it also makes you radiant upon casting the super. And Daybreak hits about 90% harder than at base thanks to Dawn Chorus, and on top of that, if you are using the super on a boss or champion, you'll apply a 15% weaken to them with any ability or your super thanks to Revitalizing Blast. So your super is extremely strong with this build, and it is just so much more fun to run than Well of Radiance. That is also why Celestial Fire is nice, because you can chuck out a melee to debuff a champion whenever you like. And guess what? We aren't even done. Raise of Precision allows solar precision final blows to cause an ignition when we are radiant, which is basically all the time. So it's just another way to proc ignitions with this insane build. If you're a fan of the channel, then you may have seen my build video on Mantle of Battle Harmony. Well, I tried that build with Polaris Lance just to see how it performed, but I wasn't built into ignitions like I am with this build, and the ignitions were much less effective. Then I went full Scorched Earth with these fragments and Dawn Chorus, and the ignitions were wrecking everything in sight, so it was definitely worth building into. For stats, it is the usual resilience, discipline, and recovery, and that's pretty much all you need to know. This build goes extremely hard this season because of how easy it is to get Radiant. I just love it. Let me know down in the comments how you've been liking this build, and leave a like on the video if you're still watching, as it really helps me out. And if you want more awesome builds like this one, then be sure to subscribe. Happy ignition triggering, and take care.